Japan has ancient temples, mountain shrines, and some of the most peaceful landscapes you'll ever see. And right alongside all of that, it has places so deeply unsettling that even locals won't go near them after dark. Some are famous, some are known only to the people who live nearby and wish they didn't. These are the top 18 creepiest places in Japan that locals warn you to stay away from. Number 18. Hashima Island, Battleship Island, Nagasaki Prefecture. Hashima Island, commonly known as Gunkanjima, Battleship Island, earned its nickname from the silhouette it cuts on the water, which resembles a warship. From a distance, it looks impressive. Up close, it is something else entirely. The island was a coal mining settlement operated by Mitsubishi from 1890 until 1974. At its peak in 1959, it housed roughly 5,259 people on a landmass, just 6.3 hectares in size, one of the highest population densities ever recorded anywhere in the world. The island had apartment blocks, a school, a hospital, a cinema, a pachinko parlor, and a roof-level garden. It was, in its own vertical, self-contained way, a complete city pressed onto a concrete platform in the East China Sea. When Mitsubishi closed the mines in January 1974, coal demand had declined in favor of petroleum. Every resident left within 3 months. The buildings remained, and the sea air began doing what sea air does to concrete and steel. For over 30 years, the island sat completely abandoned, deteriorating, inaccessible to the public. Limited tourism reopened in 2009, and the island was designated a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2015, partly as a recognition of its industrial history, and partly because the inscription process involved significant diplomatic friction with South Korea, given that Korean laborers, many of them coerced, worked the mines under Japanese wartime occupation conditions. The history is not simple. The multi-story apartment blocks, their windows long since empty, lean at angles that suggest structural opinions about their own future. Floors have collapsed, stairwells are exposed, vegetation has taken hold in the cracks. The island looks like someone hit pause on a city mid-sentence. Number 17. Aokigahara Forest, Yamanashi Prefecture. Aokigahara sits at the base of Mount Fuji, spreading across roughly 30 square kilometers of dense forest that grew on hardened lava from Fuji's 864 CE eruption. The forest is genuinely beautiful in parts. Ancient trees, mossy ground, filtered light. It is also Japan's most well-documented site of suicide, a designation that has accumulated over decades and is now inseparable from the place's identity. The soil beneath the forest is volcanic and rich in iron, which affects compass readings and has historically caused hikers to become disoriented. GPS navigation has reduced this problem significantly, but the reputation for getting lost long predates GPS. Japanese authorities stopped releasing annual death statistics for the forest in 2003, partly out of concern that publicizing the numbers was having a compounding effect. Signs at the entrances urge visitors to reconsider and provide crisis support numbers. The forest is also associated in Japanese folklore with yurei, the spirits of the dead, a connection that predates its modern association with suicide. The silence inside is unusual. The density of the trees muffles sound more completely than most forests, and on still days the interior feels cut off from everything outside. Number 16. Nakagusuku Hotel Ruins, Okinawa Prefecture. The Nakagusuku Hotel on Okinawa was never finished and never opened. Construction began in the 1970s on a hillside overlooking the historic Nakagusuku Castle ruins, a UNESCO World Heritage Site dating to the 15th century. Work stopped mid-construction, allegedly after workers began experiencing what they described as strange occurrences on the site. The building has sat unfinished and empty ever since. The version of events most commonly told is that the construction disturbed a sacred site, and that the workers' experiences were a direct result of that disruption. How much of this account is accurate history, and how much is accumulated local storytelling is genuinely difficult to separate at this point. What is documented is that the building was abandoned before completion and has remained in that state for decades. The proximity to the actual Nakagusuku Castle gives the location a particular weight. The castle was the site of real historical violence. It changed hands multiple times during the turbulent period of Okinawan history in the 14th and 15th centuries, and the island itself was the scene of some of the most brutal fighting of the Pacific War in 1945. The layers of history on that hillside are considerable. Access to the hotel ruin is restricted. It draws urban explorers and ghost tourism regardless, which is how these things tend to go. Number 15. Inunaki Village, Inunaki Mura, Fukuoka Prefecture. Inunaki Village occupies a peculiar category. It is a location famous across Japan for a set of legends that have largely replaced the actual history of the place in popular consciousness. The story, as it circulates, a remote village in the mountains of Fukuoka Prefecture, where Japanese laws don't apply, where the inhabitants are hostile to outsiders, and where people who venture in don't come back. Signs allegedly warn visitors that the laws of Japan end at the tunnel entrance. Websites with detailed survivor accounts have circulated for years. The factual Inunaki village is a real, now abandoned settlement in Fukuoka's mountains that fell into depopulation over the 20th century as the rural exodus that affected most of Japan's remote communities played out. The tunnel associated with the legend, Inunaki Tunnel, is an old, dark, narrow road tunnel that was bypassed when a new tunnel was built. It still exists and is technically accessible. It is a dark tunnel in a mountain. That is genuinely the extent of it. The legends around Inunaki Village became so established in Japanese internet culture that the location became the basis for a 2019 horror film titled Inunaki Village. At this point, the mythology and the physical location are two almost entirely separate things, and the mythology is considerably more populated than the village has been for decades. Number 14. Battlefields of Okinawa, Okinawa Prefecture. The island of Okinawa was the site of one of the largest and bloodiest ground battles of the Pacific War. Between April 1st and June 22nd, 1945, the Battle of Okinawa resulted in the deaths of approximately 12,000 American troops, over 100,000 Japanese military personnel, and an estimated 100,000 to 150,000 Okinawan civilians, roughly a quarter to a third of the island's entire civilian population. The scale of civilian death was partly the result of Japanese military directives that in documented instances involved forcing Okinawan civilians to commit mass suicide rather than surrender to American forces. The island has been rebuilt and densely inhabited for 8 decades. It is a popular tourist destination with beaches and resort hotels, and underneath portions of that development, unexploded ordnance from 1945 continues to be found. The Japanese government's disposal teams handle hundreds of UXO discoveries on Okinawa every year. The caves of the interior, many used as shelters and last stands during the battle, remain. The Himeyuri Peace Museum commemorates the Himeyuri student nurses, young women mobilized to care for wounded soldiers, who died in large numbers in the battle's final weeks. The southern end of the island, where fighting concentrated in its final phase, is dotted with memorials and remains a site of active historical memory for Okinawan families whose grandparents lived through it. The weight of 1945 is present here in ways that are not supernatural. They are documented, historical, and immediate. Number 13, the Suicide Cliffs of Saipan, Japanese memory site, Northern Mariana Islands. Technically outside the Japanese archipelago, but deeply embedded in Japanese wartime memory. The cliffs of Saipan, now part of the Northern Mariana Islands, were the site of mass suicides by Japanese civilians and military personnel in July 1944 as American forces completed their invasion of the island. Facing Japanese military propaganda describing American forces as brutal, cultural prohibitions against surrender, and genuine fear, thousands of Japanese civilians, women, children, elderly, jumped from the cliffs at the northern end of Saipan. American military accounts describe soldiers attempting through interpreters to urge civilians not to jump and being unable to stop what was happening. The sites, Banzai Cliff and Suicide Cliff, are now memorials visited by Japanese tour groups and war history researchers. They are maintained and solemn. Japanese school trips have included Saipan visits for war education. The cliffs are spectacular natural formations, The contrast between the physical beauty of the location and what happened there in 1944 is jarring in a way that most purpose-built war memorials don't replicate. The cliffs were not built for this, they simply happened to be there. Number 12. Himuro Mansion, Nara Prefecture. The Himuro Mansion in Nara Prefecture sits somewhere between documented history and elaborately constructed legend, and the proportion of each has never been settled. The legend describes a mansion where a ritual killing took place centuries ago. A family murder conducted as part of a religious ceremony gone wrong, leaving the property cursed and its subsequent inhabitants unfortunate. The mansion is said to be the basis for the Fatal Frame video game series, a survival horror franchise that began in 2001 involving photography-based combat with ghosts in a haunted Japanese estate. Tecmo, the developer, has neither confirmed nor denied the connection, which has kept the question alive in gaming communities for over 2 decades. The actual Himuro Mansion, assuming the Nara property that local legend associates with this story is the correct one, is a traditional Japanese estate that has passed through multiple owners. Its documented history is unremarkable. The ritual murder story is not corroborated by any historical record that researchers have been able to locate. What is true? The mansion exists. The legend has circulated for decades, the Fatal Frame games are genuinely frightening, and the combination has made Himuro one of the most discussed, supposedly haunted locations in Japan among both domestic and international audiences. The legend is doing most of the work here, but the legend is remarkably persistent. Number 11. Nara Dreamland, Nara Prefecture. Nara Dreamland was a theme park that opened in 1961, modeled closely on Disneyland, which had opened in California 6 years earlier. It had a castle, it had a main street, it had a roller coaster called the Asuka that was, for decades, the park's signature attraction. For a period in the 1960s and 1970s, it was a legitimate entertainment destination, drawing hundreds of thousands of visitors annually. By the late 1990s, the real Disneyland's Japanese counterpart, Tokyo Disneyland, opened in 1983, had rendered Nara Dreamland obsolete. The park could not compete with Disney's resources, characters, or brand recognition. Attendance collapsed. The park closed in August 2006 after 45 years of operation. What remained was a complete amusement park in arrested decay. The castle, the main street buildings, the roller coaster, the Ferris wheel, and dozens of smaller attractions, all left in place as the surrounding vegetation grew. The paint peeled, and the structures aged without maintenance. Urban explorers discovered it quickly and documented it extensively. The photographs that circulated internationally showed the Asuka roller coaster wrapped in vines, the castle's windows darkened, and a main street that looked like Disneyland had been abandoned mid-operation and left to the elements for a decade. The park was demolished in 2016. The site has been developed. The photographs of it in its abandoned state remain some of the most widely shared urban exploration images from Japan. A specific kind of melancholy attached to entertainment infrastructure that was built to be joyful and ended up being something quite different. Number 10. Okiku's Well, Himeji Castle, Hyogo Prefecture. Himeji Castle is one of the finest surviving examples of feudal Japanese architecture, a complex of white plastered walls and layered roofs that earned its informal name Shirasagijo, White Heron Castle, from its resemblance to a heron spreading its wings. It is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, a National Special Historic Site, and by anyone's reckoning, beautiful. Inside the castle grounds, there is a well. The well is associated with the legend of Okiku, a tragic figure in Japanese folklore whose story exists in multiple versions, but consistently involves a servant girl, an unjust accusation, and death by being thrown into the well. The legend of Okiku is foundational in Japanese ghost story tradition. It has been dramatized in kabuki theater, film, and literature for centuries. The 1998 horror film Ringu, and through it, the American remake The Ring, drew on imagery of a vengeful woman emerging from water that has deep roots in the Okiku tradition. Whether this specific well at Himeji is the historical Okiku's well in any documented sense is not established. The legend exists in multiple regional versions across Japan. Himeji's version is the most visited, partly because the castle is already a major tourist destination, and partly because a famous well inside a famous castle suits both parties. The well is real, genuinely old, and inside the castle grounds. The ghost is optional. Number 9. Unit 731 Complex, Harbin, China, Japanese Imperial History. Unit 731 is not in Japan. It is in Harbin, in northeastern China, but it is Japanese in origin, in history, and in the particular silence that has surrounded it in Japanese public discourse for decades. Unit 731 was a covert biological and chemical warfare research unit of the Imperial Japanese Army that operated from 1936 to 1945. Under Lieutenant General Shiro Ishii, the unit conducted human experimentation on an estimated 3,000 or more prisoners, primarily Chinese, Korean, and Soviet civilians and POWs. The experiments included deliberate infection with plague and cholera, vivisection, and pressure and temperature experiments on live subjects. Victims who died were referred to in unit documents as maruta, logs. At the end of the war, facilities were destroyed and records burned. Ishii and senior officers were given immunity from prosecution by American occupation authorities in exchange for experimental data. None were tried at the Tokyo War Crimes Tribunal. Japan's formal recognition of Unit 731's activities has remained partial and contested for decades. The museum at the Harbin site opened in 1985 and has been expanded since. The physical remains, original structures, excavated areas, preserved artifacts document the operation's scale. This appears on a list of creepy places not for supernatural reasons, but because of what was done there in documented, systematic, and largely unaccounted for ways. Number 8. The Catacombs of Zenpukuji, Tokyo. Zenpukuji is one of the oldest Buddhist temples in Tokyo. Its founding is traditionally dated to 824 CE, and it has served as an active temple through more than 12 centuries of Japanese history. It is located in the Azabu-Juban district of Minato Ward, surrounded by modern residential and commercial development. The temple has a cemetery, as most traditional Japanese Buddhist temples do. What makes Zenpukuji notable here is less the cemetery itself. Japanese temple cemeteries are common and not typically considered frightening, and more the accumulated weight of the specific dead and the age of the ground they occupy. The concept of kagare, ritual impurity, or spiritual contamination associated with death, shapes how many Japanese people relate to cemetery and mortuary spaces in ways that go beyond simple superstition. An ancient cemetery in a densely populated city where the land is considered to retain something of its many occupants occupies a specific place in that belief system. Zenpukuji is open during daytime hours. It is peaceful and historically significant. What it feels like to be there alone after dark is a question that most people who live nearby have not bothered to answer. Number 7. Abandoned hospitals of Kanto, various locations. Japan has a category of abandoned building. Haikyo, a portmanteau of the characters for ruin and empty, that includes dozens of former hospitals, sanitariums, and medical facilities scattered across the Kanto region and beyond. Abandoned hospital documentation has a substantial following among Japanese urban explorers, and it is one of the genre's most frequently visited subjects. Several former tuberculosis sanitariums built in the early to mid-20th century in isolated mountain or forest locations are among the most discussed. These facilities were deliberately remote, built to separate patients from the general population during a period when tuberculosis was both common and incurable. When effective treatments became available and the sanitariums closed, they were often left as they were. A former infectious disease hospital in Kanagawa Prefecture, sometimes referenced as the Koshin Ruins, has been documented extensively. Patient rooms, medical equipment, and records were left in place for years. Chairs at the angles someone last placed them, cabinets still holding their contents. The Haikyo aesthetic of interrupted life is particularly potent in medical spaces, where the purpose of the building was the care of people who were suffering. Japanese ghost lore holds that places where people died in isolation and pain without proper ritual closure retain something of the dead. Whatever you make of that belief, the atmosphere of these buildings is consistently described by the photographers who document them as distinct from other abandoned structures. the history of the use is still present in the space. Number 6. Tottori Sand Dunes, Tottori Prefecture. The Tottori Sand Dunes are the largest sand dunes in Japan, stretching roughly 16 kilometers along the Sanin coast and reaching heights of up to 90 meters. They are an official natural monument and one of Tottori Prefecture's most promoted tourist attractions. They are also, in Japanese folklore, a liminal space associated with ghosts, disappearances, and the boundary between the living world and whatever comes after. The specific folklore around Tottori's dunes involves stories of people lured into the dunes at night by ghostly lights, wandering in disorientation, and not finding their way back. These stories have a long regional history and overlap with the broader Japanese tradition of kitsunebi, foxfire, the supernatural lights attributed to kitsune, foxes, that draw unwary travelers off course. In practical terms, the dunes disorient visitors. The landscape lacks clear landmarks. At night, without artificial lighting, the scale and uniformity of the dunes produces a genuine navigational challenge. The sand shifts. The wind changes the surface. The foxfire stories may be mythological in origin, but they map accurately onto the actual experience of being in a large featureless landscape in the dark. The dunes are beautiful in daylight. At night, the locals, consistent with the regional folklore, tend not to visit them alone. Number 5. Ruins of Nara Women's University Ghost Stories, Nara City. The older buildings of certain Japanese national universities, particularly those with long histories and buildings that predate modern construction, have accumulated institutional ghost stories that are taken seriously enough by students to shape the building's reputations across generations of enrollment. Nara Women's University, established in 1908, occupies a campus that includes several buildings from its early Meiji and Taisho era construction. The formal Western-influenced architecture of those buildings, built during a period of rapid Westernization of Japanese institutional design, sits in particular visual contrast to the Japanese residential neighborhoods surrounding the campus. The buildings are beautiful. They are also old in the particular way of buildings that housed many students, many of whom were away from home for the first time, over many decades. The ghost stories associated with the campus are of the institutional variety, particular rooms, particular corridors, particular staircases that upper-class students warn incoming students about. These stories serve, as they do in universities across the world, both as genuine folklore and as a mechanism for the transmission of institutional culture and community identity. The line between the two is not always clear. The Meiji and Taisho era buildings are designated important cultural properties. They are architecturally extraordinary. They are also, by the accounts of students who have studied in them over the decades, unsettling in the specific way that very old buildings with many former occupants can be. Number 4. Osorezen, Mount Osore, Aomori Prefecture. Osorezen, literally Mount Dread, is a volcanic caldera in the Shimokita Peninsula of Aomori Prefecture, at the far northern tip of Honshu. The name is not metaphorical. The landscape is one of the most viscerally otherworldly in Japan. Sulfurous vents releasing yellow smoke, the smell of hydrogen sulfide hanging in the air, gray and rust-colored volcanic rock surrounding Lake Usori, and the silence of a place where very little grows. The site has been associated with the Buddhist entrance to the afterlife for over 1,000 years. The river flowing through the caldera, the lake, and the volcanic terrain are mapped in traditional belief onto descriptions of the realm of the dead. Bodaiji Temple at the site has operated since 862 CE. The Itako, blind female mediums in the Tohoku regional tradition, historically gathered at Osorezen's summer festival, the Taisai, to conduct kuchiosi, the summoning of specific deceased individuals for communication with their living relatives. The number of practicing Itako has declined significantly in recent generations, but the Taisai continues, and Osorezen's atmosphere, the sulfur vents, the 1,000-year association with death, the volcanic landscape, is not something that a visitor center and a parking lot significantly moderates. Number 3. Suicide Forest of Aokigahara, the Inner Trail, Deep Zone. The outer edges of Aokigahara, where guided tours operate and the main trail runs, are a different environment from the interior. The inner reaches, reached by leaving established paths, are where the forest's documented history becomes most directly present in the landscape. Volunteer groups and official search teams conduct regular sweeps of the interior. They mark trees with tape and rope to allow search parties to navigate back out. Portions of this tape and rope remain visible from previous searches. Visitors who enter off-trail encounter these markers, the physical evidence of the systematic, ongoing effort to find people who came in and didn't come out. The Japan Forum for Life has conducted prevention outreach at the forest for years. Signs placed by the Yamanashi prefectural government and by mental health organizations are addressed directly to anyone who has come intending not to leave, offering phone numbers and urging reconsideration. For a visitor who was simply hiking, these signs are a reminder of exactly what has made this forest what it is. The forest holds the weight of its history in the particular silence of its interior. It has no intent. It is a forest. But what human history has layered onto it over 60 years is not easy to be present in without registering. Number 2, Yomotsu Hirasaka, Shimane Prefecture. Yomotsu Hirasaka is a specific location in Higashi Izumo-cho, Shimane Prefecture, a small slope marked by a stone monument that holds a place in Japanese mythology so ancient that it predates any of the historical events that typically structure discussions of Japanese history. According to the Kojiki, Japan's oldest chronicle, compiled in 712 CE, Yomotsu Hirasaka is the entrance to Yomi, the underworld of Japanese mythology. In the creation myth of Izanagi and Izanami, the god Izanami died giving birth to the fire deity Kagutsuchi and descended to Yomi. Her husband Izanagi followed her to bring her back. He found her decomposing, was horrified, and fled. Izanami, furious at his reaction to seeing her in her true post-death state, sent the dead of Yomi to pursue him. Izanagi escaped and rolled a great boulder across the entrance to Yomi at Yomotsu Hirasaka, separating the land of the living from the land of the dead permanently. The physical location in Shimane Prefecture is a gentle, unremarkable slope in a quiet rural area. There is a stone marker identifying it as the mythological site. There is nothing there that would independently suggest it as the entrance to the underworld. The significance is entirely in the story, one of the oldest written narratives in the Japanese language, documenting the cosmological boundary between life and death at this specific, small, ordinary-looking hillside. The contrast between what the place looks like and what it is said to be is, in its own way, more unsettling than a dramatic landscape would be. Number 1, Aokigahara, the complete picture. Aokigahara appears at the top of this list not because of the supernatural, but because no other location in Japan concentrates so many dimensions of the unsettling: historical, folkloric, environmental, and contemporary, in a single place with such consistency and such documented human cost. The forest sits at the base of Mount Fuji, growing from the hardened lava of the 864 CE eruption. It covers 30 square kilometers. The trees grow densely from a root system embedded in volcanic rock, creating a canopy that muffles sound in an unusual way. Visitors consistently remark on how different the silence inside Aokigahara feels from silence elsewhere. The magnetic properties of the volcanic soil have historically interfered with compass navigation. Japanese author Seicho Matsumoto published a novel in 1960 called Kuroi Jukai, Black Sea of Trees, in which two characters travel to Aokigahara to die together. The novel is widely credited with beginning the specific modern association between the forest and suicide, though Aokigahara had associations with death and abandonment in regional folklore that predate the 20th century. The Matsumoto novel accelerated something already present. The association deepened over the following decades. By the 1990s, Aokigahara was internationally recognized in this context. Japanese authorities stopped disclosing annual numbers in 2003. The forest patrols, the prevention signs, the regular interior searches, these have become part of the forest's reality alongside the trees, the rock, and the silence. Writer and journalist Jake Adelstein, who has reported on Japanese society for decades, described it. The forest is not a place that kills people. People choose to go there, but the choice of that place, over and over again, has given it a weight that you feel the moment you move away from the trail. 18 places across Japan, some famous, some barely known outside the prefecture where they sit, that carry histories, legends, or documented realities dark enough that the people who live nearest to them tend to exercise a certain practical caution. Japan is a country where the line between the historical and the mythological has never been drawn very clearly, and some of these places exist on that line in ways that are genuinely difficult to categorize. If this one held your attention, hit that like button and subscribe. There is more of this kind of thing coming.